Hello everybody, my name is Becky. This is Aunt Beck's Creations, and for most of my viewers I am a mixed media artist. I do sew. I have sewn since I was about 9 years old, and I have had with the way the world is now, I had a lot of junk going on in my head. And then Michelle Sews was talking about this wonderful program to sew dresses for little girls, and I thought, what better way to get out of my own head and join this wonderful cause and make some dresses that I could send in to benefit some little girls that I will never meet, but I want to bring happiness to. So I am going to do a quick sew through. I'm not going to show every step by step, but I will discuss the steps and maybe show a little bit of the sewing, but I'm not going to sit here for hours making a dress with you. I want this to be a quick video. So I'm going to first discuss the pattern. Okay, and this is the pattern I'm going to use right here. It is a McCall's pattern numbers 2004. The copyright for it is 1999. I'm sure there is something similar in the pattern books, but probably not exactly the same. The request was no buttons, no zippers, only tie closings. Well, this doesn't have any closings, so I thought it would be perfect for this project. There's the line drawings. I hope you can see them out. And let me show you how simple this dress is. It has one sheet, and the instructions, this is all about your basic information and how to lay it out and everything. The instructions start here and are on the back. That's it. And so let's start sewing these. I'm going to change the setup just a little bit, and we will start with the pockets. You have to sew the little hearts first. So step one, sew your hearts. Alright, so let's get started. You will have 4 hearts. 1, 2, 3, 4. And each pocket takes 2 hearts. And what we are going to do is put right sides together. And I'm going to stitch 1/4 of an inch all the way around the edge, and I will show you in the instructions. You sew 1/4 of an inch all the way around, but you leave a little opening just big enough that you can turn the heart right side out. So I'm going to put these right sides together. I'm going to do the stitching, leaving that opening on one of the sides. So like right along here, you leave an opening to turn right side out. And then everywhere there is a curve, you cut a little wedge out. You don't just snip. They want you to cut like a little V shape out at the center of the heart, of course, and then along the curves. And what that does is that relieves the tension so that the seam will work with you. If you don't do these clips, it will not release the tension along the seam area, and your heart won't lay flat. No matter how much you press it, it's not going to lay flat. So that's how you do step 1. Alright, I'm going to try to catch this action on the video here, but when I'm sewing these hearts, I'm going pretty slow. Now see, I'm on a flat section, so I can push down with that clip and pull it away. And it doesn't catch or anything to remove the clips. And I do go slow, and when you're turning, you want to make sure the needle's down in the thread. And y'all keep in mind, my machine is from 1982. She is a workhorse. She continues to go when my newer machines fall apart and their parts are no longer available. This is my workhorse. And I go back to her every time because she doesn't give me any sass or problems. Try to stop with the needle down, and of course, because she's an older lady here, you just have to sometimes manually put the needle in to the fabric if you don't catch it perfect every time. But you always leave your needle in the fabric when you're doing your turn so that it doesn't lose the flow of the seam, basically. Because if you stop with it out of the fabric could shift and then you wouldn't be in the same place. On rounded areas, you have to slow down because you have to make minor little turns and stop dead in the middle of the top of the heart and then turn so that your seam allowance stays at the 1/4 of an inch. And if you go slow and steady, don't try to get in a hurry when there's curves because it'll do you no good. And see how you push down and pull it away and it just comes off, and I've got my little tub there. I just kind of fling it toward it. Of course, that means sometimes I have to hunt clips that go astray. And just don't forget, you've got to leave an opening. You can't go all the way around the heart and then expect to be able to turn it right side out, right? Once I learned to make sure all the flat side of the clips were down, it made a world of difference on how I used my clips, because you have that downward pressure to help you remove them. Now you want to do a reverse because we're going to put some tension on this seam, and I always lift my presser foot, get my thread to where it'll pull easy, and then I always have little pieces of fabric and I just start sewing on it. And then that way I'm just wasting a little bit of thread, not a great big long string. And I always have leader enders, clipping my thread tail short. Alright, I'm going to bring y'all back over here and I'll see you in just a second. Okay, now we're back over here where I said you have to cut the little V's out. So the thing about when you're cutting, have something that's got nice sharp tips on it. This is a pair of Ginger scissors, and I would recommend, if you buy Gingers and you go to that expense, make sure you get one that covers the blades so it doesn't, you don't accidentally stab yourself, because the end of this is very sharp. But I cut a little V out, and you do not want to cut through your stitching. Up to, but not through. So you cut a little wedge out, and then you do that up here. And you just do it on the curved sections. You cut the little wedges out. I'll do it just on one side of one heart, and then I'll let you guys go while I cut the rest. And then I go down one more time. So between the center of the top of the heart and around the side, I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then on the tip of the heart, you just cut the tip off. So you don't have all that bulk of fabric at the tip. So when you turn these right side out, it will lay smooth too. Nice crisp point. So let me finish clipping and turning, and I'll come back and I'll tell you what the next step is. Alright, I've got them turned out. So the right side is out, and here's my little opening. I have this little turner. If I can remember everything I've used, I'll take the time to go through Amazon and try to find all this stuff. I do not have an affiliate link. I'm really old school, you guys. So if I can, I will find this. It's just a little, this is, I think, made of bamboo, if I remember right. And what you can do is, it's got this rounded edge. If you go inside the heart and just kind of rub it along the edge, it'll push the seam out and get you a really good start on your pressing. You just work it around. I love this thing. I think I will list, you know, everything that I'm using that I really enjoy using. I will take the time to look them up for you, so you can just look in my description box below. I might get me a piece of paper. All right, and then what you do is make sure that you take it to your iron. You're going to make sure there's about a 1/4 inch of fabric inside that hole on each side. And then once you've pressed this really nice and flat, you're going to take a hand sewing needle and just close this hole up. Just real careful like. So there is a little, I do all of the hand sewing. Like I said, I'm old school. So see how much this little tool helps? So let me do this other heart and I'll press them and stitch them, and then we'll come on and I'll tell you the next step. I am about to do the stitching up of my opening, and I wanted to show you something. This is wax, and this is beeswax. This may be beeswax, but I'm not sure. But the reason you take, this is my grandmother's beeswax. You can see how well it's been used, and I'm still using it. It kind of looks ugly, but it does the job. This one seems to crumble and fall apart, but it's inside this little carrier, and it's got a place for your thread to go. And I had been using that because I'd misplaced Grandma's wax. But what I do is I just lay the thread, I put it through the needle, and I'm going to draw it across the wax once. That's all you need. Then take your hands and then very slowly pull the thread through your fingers, and the heat of your hand will soften the wax and coat the thread. And I do that like twice before I tie my knot. All right, this keeps it from getting tangled when you are doing your hand stitching, and I just put it around my finger and then roll a knot on. It's not a very big knot, so we'll do another one, and I just roll it and then pull it taut. So now there's a little knot on the end, and I hide my knots inside wherever I'm closing up. So I'll take this clip off and I'll find the opening where it starts, go to the inside, and just get a hold of the edge so that your knot is hidden between the two layers, and you can tuck the tail down in and then just stitch it up like you normally would hand stitch an opening close. But I did want to share the beeswax tip. It really does help and keep the thread from snagging and carrying on. If you've got your grandma's, use it. It's not going to hurt it to use it, and she'd be proud for you too. Or you can buy the wax that comes in the little container like this. It works well too. It's just I prefer my grandma's wax. So another tip of the day. All right, they're turned, pressed, and the opening is stitched close. And now the next thing they want you to do is do the top stitching at the top of the pocket. So what you do is line the heart up, not with the edges because, you know, we've used the seam allowance. But you see these two dots here? We're going to put a pin at each dot on both of them. And you're going to take it to your machine and you're going to top stitch really close to the edge, because basically you're just doing the finishing of the top here. So you top stitch only between the two pins at the top. The rest of the stitching will take place when we adhere the pockets to the front of the dress. So I don't put the markings on the dresses except for the dots that are on the actual dress. Like if there were dart or pleats or any of that, I would put those markings on. And I don't use Taylor's chalk. Again, I'm old school. I use the wheel and the wax paper stuff because I find it gives me the best marks, and I can do them on the back side of the paper while the pattern is still attached to my fabric after I've cut it out. And I will do a demonstration of that at a later date of how I do that. Alright, I'm going to do that top stitching, and then I'm going to pull the piece I have on the wall down here. Whoops. And I'll get my front of my dress piece out. And what I will do is I will put this on the dress. And see, there's 2 dots on here. And I will come back and show you how I mark those, because I just use pins. I don't mark on the fabric. I just use some pins, and then what you do, once you've marked them with some, with pins, you line up where you started and stopped stitching between the 2 dots like that, and pin the pocket to the front, and then stitch it along the edge between your edging stitching here. All of this bit gets sewn onto the front of the dress. But I'll come back and show you how I mark where the pockets go. Alright, we're over here on my dining room table. So I've got the hearts, and it's going to be hard for you to see, but I have done the stitching between the dots. So along the top here, I've done that stitching. So now what you do is you take your pattern piece and open it up and just line it up, okay? So it's lined back up with everything, right? I'm going to hold it with my hand. Sometimes I use pattern weights and other times I don't. So I'm just going to stick a pin in from the front side like this, at an angle a little bit. And then what I do is I get a 3rd pin, and I just kind of lift the edge, and I find where the pin has gone through, and I stick my new pin in there, and then I can pull this pin out, come over here, find where the pin goes in, put that pin in like that, and that gives me where these have to line up. Then you have to flip the pattern piece to do the other side in the same way. Alright. Pin is going into this dress front. Line up your stitching start and stop like so. And then I'm just going to pin it in place. And I like to do the ones closest to the pins, like the marking pins. Put these pins in, and then I can use these for my other spots. That I like to put 4 pins in to hold the pocket right firm in place. And then I will take it to the sewing machine. I'll pin the other pocket on. I will take it to the sewing machine, and I will sew near the edge of the pocket all the way around. If you want to reinforce it, you can with a 2nd line of stitching, but I've just been doing 1 row of stitching with maybe a little bit of back and forth here at the tip to hold it in place. So that's how you pin the pockets on and get them perfect every time. So the pockets are sewn on. So our next step is we're going to do the shoulder seams on the dress as well as the facing pieces. So what you do is you get your backs, put your front side up, match your armholes up, so that you know that you're going in the right direction, because you don't want to do this and have the middle of the back on an armhole, right? So then you're going to just match up. There's a little notch I clipped in here of where the little triangle on the shoulder was, and I'm just going to line those up if I can. And line up the armhole edge and that little notch. And then I'm going to use clips. Just clip it on there, and then I'm going to do the same here. Alright, put a couple clips in it. Flat side of the clip down, that'll go against the sewing machine bed, so it's easier to take off. So that's the shoulder seams on the dress. Now on the facing, you open your, this is the front facing because it's all in one piece, just like the front of the dress was in one piece and the back of the dress was in two pieces. It goes the same as that for the facing pieces. Then the armholes are here, so you want to match up your armholes. So put this one here and this one here and just match the shoulders up. All of this other matching is nothing that you need to worry about. The only thing you need to line up is the actual seam you're going to sew. So that's the shoulder seam. Alright. Once you sew these shoulder seams together, you need to finish the bottom of the facing pieces. You could do this before you do the shoulder seams, you know, finish this edge that goes along the bottom. You can use your serger, but what I do is I will stitch 1/4 of an inch along this edge, and then I'll just fold that up. So after I've done a stitch line, that's my guideline, and it also acts as stay stitching. So once you've done that 1/4 inch across all along the bottom of this one, and the front piece, all this long curvy piece here, you do 1/4 of an inch away. You're going to snip your curves. You just do a little clip like you would where you're marking where your the arrows are on the side. I do that, and then it's easy to just turn this edge up, and then I just zigzag across it, and it looks perfect. Like I said, if you have a serger, you can serge it. Alright, so after I get shoulder seams sewn and I've done the finish on the bottom of these, I will come back and show you what that finish looks like, and I will go on to the next step. Okay, a note on seam finishing. I told you I'm going to fold this over like this, and I'll put my clips on it, and then I'll run it through my machine with the zigzag as wide as I can get it over this, and it gives it a real nice finish. Now as far as seams like this, you take and you trim your seams down to about half of their width with pinking shears, and this is how I finish seams. And then I just do another zigzag. So basically all my seams have 2 rows of stitches on them, one straight and one zigzag, and I use the pinking shears, and I do that on all of my seams. Alright, so I'll take this back to the machine now that I've trimmed this bit off. So now we've got the shoulder seams on the dress sewn and finished. See, I finished them with the zigzag and the pinking shears. And then I did the same on the facing. So see, that's how I finished it. Pinked it and then zigzagged it. Now the seams, because I've got a finish like this instead of splitting the seam or finishing the edges before I sewed, I'm going to lay the facing shoulder seam toward the front, and on the dress I press them toward the back of the dress. That way when I match the facing up to the dress like this, there's little marks, little clips here, and little clips in the dress, and you line those up. So, so we'll put some of these clips in here. I put one right in the center and one at each little clip. Again, flat side down. Now, if you think about when you're putting something over the shoulders, it's at a curve. Your body's not straight. You have to meld it. So I'm going to take and lift it up after I've clipped it here in the middle, so my center I know is center. I'm going to match up my shoulder seams, and when I do that, I lift it up to do that matching so that I have the same curve going on as you do on your body. And then you can see the shoulder seams will match up. There's the seam edge there and the seam edge there. If you kind of lock them together as you would in quilting, and you could put a pin straight in there, but I'm using clips, so I'm just going to put a clip on there. And then I do the same for this area. I kind of give it a curve. You get the neck edge done first, and then you do the armholes. So we're going to match these all up. This is the large dot at the back of the dress. There's one there and there. And technically they should line up perfectly. But sometimes my cutting's a little off. But what I'm going to do is, instead of using the clips all the way around, where that X is, it's pretty close, I'm going to put a pin in the middle of it. That tells me to stop sewing there. You don't want to sew all the way to the edge at the back. Now on the side seams, on the armholes, you can go all the way to the edge. Okay, so we got to do this other side. I hope I'm in shot. There I am. So if you match up your shoulder seam, remember, one will go one way, one will go the other. Clip them together. And put a couple more in here. There's one. Again, flat side of the clip down so it doesn't catch on the machine. They ask that you sew the neck edge first and then do the arms, but while I'm pinning, I just pin it or clip it or pin it or whatever you call while I'm setting it up. I get it all to the point where it's ready to sew. This one's way. Get this whipped around here, and I'm going to match up my shoulder seams. And get it as smooth as you can. There we go. And now this has some little clips here to match up on there. Match up your little, any markings, try to get them matched up. So then I can do the curvy bit on the shoulders. Smooth the fabric that's on the dress. I'm only going to get the clips on one armhole, just so you can see what I'm doing. Because you're dealing with curves, take your time on the machine. You don't have to zip through. Think of your sewing as something you enjoy a lot. See, that got twisted under there. And take time to enjoy every stitch, because you don't have to be a speed demon. Sewing should be, to me, something that's relaxing and enjoyable. That's why I don't think I'd ever sew for a living with somebody. I take the time to make sure it's nice and smooth. And I will check this again when I get it over at the machine, because that's just how I am. And I might fiddle a little working at it. Alright, so we're going to say I've got it all clipped on both sides. I would go ahead and clip the other armhole as well. So all of this would be clipped as well. But I sew the neck edge, then I'm going to sew the armhole, and once I get all of those seams done, I'll come back and show the next step, because the next step is the real magic of it all. Alright, so around the neck and the arms, the first thing I do is clip into my curves with regular scissors. Just a couple clips so that the tension's released on those curves. Oh dear, I'll have to unpick that, so I'm not going to clip there. It folded on me. So I'll fix that. Once I clip these in the curve sections, I will cut with my pinking shears, and then I will zigzag. So I'll have a finished seams. But I do the bottom of the facing. When this is turned, this is what's visible, and that's a nice finished edge. So that was my next step. And then I'll come back, once I've done all of the finish work on these seams, I'll come back and show you the magic that happens to get this right side out. Okay, so I've got my seams finished, clipped, finished, all ready to go. So now I'm going to take this little tool. It's got like a little hook on the end. Can you see the little hook on the end? And it's got a place here for your finger. What we're going to do is we're going to go from the front of the dress to the back through the shoulder seam. Okay, so we insert the little hook end through the front, under the facing, over the shoulder, and then just somewhere along this back, we're going to hook the little hook on, put some fabric up in there, then push the little finger or whatever you call it, then twist it a little so it's kind of wrapped in there like that, and then we just pull it carefully back through, because you don't want to stretch anything. Once you get to the other side, you can take your little hook off and then just gently pull the back through the shoulder seam, and voila, it's out. And in doing this, your neckline and your shoulders, your armholes and your neckline are all finished. And what I'll do is I'll take this to my ironing board and I will carefully press it, and then you sew up the back seam and then the two side seams, and I will finish all my seams in the same manner as I did this seam so far. Again, you're going to push that little finger up there and give it a little twist so you've got a hold of it, and then pull it through to this side and then pull it on through like so. Don't want to get too aggressive. Work it a little bit at a time. It'll come out. Alright, so now I'm going to do a thorough pressing. Now I didn't do any top stitching on any of these, and I'll tell you why. Because when you're sewing your seams, what you're going to do is, like, you have to do the back seam first. So you right sides together, right? You'll match your little notches you cut in the back. You'll pin it all the way up, or use clips, whichever you prefer. And then when you get up to the facing part, what you're going to do is you're going to complete the seam on the little dress up to the little X or to your seam. Then stop and back stitch and lift it off. Then you're going to go to the facing side. The facing flips up and out like this. And once you've stitched up that far, then you have to come and stitch up from the seam on this side, on the facing side, to the end of the facing. All right, and finish your seams. And then when you fold this over, this will be finished and attached, and then you tack your facing to all the seams. I'll come back and show you what that looks like in just a few minutes. Okay, I have stitched my back seam. Get it out here where you can see it. And what I've done is I went to my ironing board and I pressed the seam one way and the facing the opposite direction. And the reason you sew up and stop is so the facing is a separate entity than the dress at this very point. So you can press one seam in one direction and one in the other, and then it'll lay nice and flat. And so I'm gonna just open this up. And get this as flat as I can. And then I'm going to put a pin in it. And this is just to hold the facing down. And I will do a little tack stitch right on the seam selvage, the seam section here. I'll just do a little tack there to hold the facing down. Now what I need to do next is to sew the sides the same way that I sewed the back. So I'll match up the sides and stitch them up, opening the facing out. And I'll treat it like it's a separate entity, just like I did the back seam. So I can do the same thing, put one seam going in one direction and one in the other, so that I can have a nice smooth place to tack down. And then all it will require after that these two seams are done, is hemming. And I will come back and tell you how I do a hem. The pattern calls for a 1 1/4 inch hem, but I am not putting in a 1 1/4 inch hem because I want these to just be a little bit longer than what the pattern made them up. And so I just do a little 1/2 inch hem where I stitch around the entire perimeter on my sewing machine 1/4 inch away, and then I press it up, and then I come back and I fold it over one more time and pin it or clip it, and then I actually hand sew the hems. I don't do them on the machine. So all of these hems that I've done is me sitting and watching or participating in a online Facebook craft room. We call them crafting chats, and they're done in a couple of the different groups I belong to. That's basically artists and crafters. I do not belong to any sewing groups yet. So if you know of a sewing group that you'd like to recommend, you can leave that in the comments for me. I would love to connect with some other sewists, and I will come back and show you exactly how I do the hem. And then, guess what? This little dress will be done, and you will get to see it plus its companions. Okay, so I've got the back seam and the side seams all sewn. I've got my facing pinned down in at the seams, and I'll just do some whip stitches there, and on the side. And then I've got my hem is all prepped, so I can sit and hand stitch. And let me just take a couple of the clips off so I can show you what I do. I do a 1/4 inch stitch from the edge, and then I press that well with my iron, and then I just gently flip it over and put my clips on, and I just put on a good movie or another YouTuber, and I sit and I just do a blind hem stitch, which is I take a small stitch that goes through the hem and through the dress. I take a small stitch and then I run the needle inside the hem, and then I'll come out again and do another tiny stitch, and I run through the hem, kind of hiding the longer sections, and I do a stitch about every ½ an inch, about the width of the clip. I'll do a stitch, and I just stitch them along, and then this little dress will be done. And once I get the hem done on this and the facing in place, I'll do my little fashion show. So the fashion show will be the next step in this video, and then I will thank everybody for watching this kind of tutorial that I've done. I hope I've shared some information that's helpful, and I hope you will enjoy all the little dresses I've made. So thanks again to Madi Sews for organizing this and putting it together and putting it out to the universe. And thanks also to Michelle Sews again, because sweet Michelle is who sent me to Madi Sews. So, alright guys, I'll be back with a fashion show